Hi, everyone. Welcome back along to the show. So today I have with me Dan Kellett. He's the Chief Data Officer at Capital One UK. And Dan is along to talk to us about and have a conversation about pragmatic data science in terms of how that has impacted on the business at Capital One. So Dan, welcome along to the show.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
No worries, and thanks a lot for coming along. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I've spoken to quite a few people in financial services. I've spoken to quite a few people in data science, and the angle and what's done there is always sort of intriguing to me, and I know people get a lot from it. So, but before we get into the topic of sort of what you've done there and data science and how it's worked and what it's impacted, it'd be great just to get an intro to you and a bit about your background.
Absolutely. So my background is in mathematics. So I studied maths for my degree at
Right.
University of Nottingham and wanted to move away from academia after my kind of first degree. Wasn't really that keen on doing more of that kind of academic study, but really wanted to start using some of those mathematical practices for real. And so joined Capital One as a graduate statistician back in 2000, and I've been here ever since, always within the world of kind of statistics, data science and data. Early days, my initial projects were all around predictive models. So building models and maintaining models that are likely to predict whether someone's going to respond to some direct mail or not.
Right.
So kind of a big part of our strategy in the early 2000s. And then kind of over the next 5 or 6 years, worked across the entire customer lifecycle. So whether that's new customer acquisition, through customer management, some operational analysis, even some kind of people analytics. Stepped into a manager role, picking up a small team, actually working on some of our test European businesses in the early 2000s. And probably about 15 years ago, stepped into the director of statistics so looking after the statistics team for the UK business. Next big step was actually a big job family transition that we made. So with the move from statistician to data science and the need to bring in greater software engineering skills, machine learning skills, and so kind of led the team through that.
Okay.
And then over the last few years, I've kind of added different parts to it. So my role now is I'm Chief Data Officer for the UK business, really with the aim of bringing together all the data disciplines to solve problems. So we have kind of data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, data stewardship. All basically, if it starts with data, it kind of sits in our department.
Right.
And that's been the case for the last kind of year and a half, 2 years, really to try and break down some of those silos and build a data culture.
What's the how have you sort of found? I know it's been a little while, but the transition from hands-on kind of statistician and maths work to kind of leading the charge and defining the strategy and putting in place this change and bringing teams together, because obviously it's very different. And also, do you still sort of dabble? Do you still try and jump in and fix models, or at least sort of point out problems?
So I a little bit I miss some of that kind of hands-on coding, hands-on data analytics. I do try and dabble, but not in a way that is going to get in the way or slow people down. Definitely, that really deep coding skill set has perhaps degraded a little bit over the years. But I think the opportunity of the role I'm in is actually there's a great chance to set the strategy and push that forward, to put in place the kind of mentoring and teaching of kind of almost the next generation of data scientists. So I think I can be more effective in spending my time there than writing large amounts of code. But I do miss it a little bit. Spare time, I definitely kind of still dabble a little bit.
I mean, it's interesting actually, there's not just from the chief data officer sort of community I know, there's not loads actually that have come from a pure kind of maths and stats background, to be fair, and data science. There's lots of different routes, but it's less common than you think it might be. So interesting to hear your journey. Just a small bit on Capital One, actually. So, and the UK business, what's the sort of breadth of products and services that Capital One have?
Yeah, so Capital One in the UK is predominantly credit card lender, so over 4 million customers in the UK, across the whole kind of customer spectrum there. So we have a range of kind of different brands and different propositions, but all within that kind of credit card lending spectrum.
Right, and that's all direct to consumer, or do you sort of back off other credit cards as well?
And that's all direct to consumer. We do have kind of some partnership brands, but we kind of run the actual kind of mechanics of how that credit card works.
Right, cool. Okay, great. Well, yeah, interesting to dig in. And I always ask that because it's kind of, different banks have a different product set, but also when we talk about, I want to come to sort of use cases and what you're doing, it sort of helps frame the kind of the breadth of products and services and business that you do. So thank you for that. So let's just sort of kick off sort of broad and what you've tried to achieve over the last couple of years, I suppose, maybe look from part of the journey where you picked up being the CDO, the Chief Data Officer. What's the kind of like broad objective been, and sort of how have you gone about that?
Yeah, and so this was a role that kind of didn't exist before, and so actually one of the things that I've really enjoyed over the last 2 years is basically defining what does a CDO do for Capital One in the UK. I don't think there were kind of massive problems to fix, but actually what there was an opportunity to bring together a real kind of centre of excellence within the UK business. We had a really great data science team, for example. We had a really great data stewardship function. But there are common themes across those different job families. And actually, if you've got a centre of excellence, it makes it much easier for you to prioritise. It makes it easier for you to share learnings or practices or processes. So a great example is recruitment. You're probably looking for similar skill sets, if not exactly the same. If you have different recruitment processes for all these different job families that don't really talk to each other, I think you're missing a trick there. And so one of the opportunities, how do you standardize some of those processes? The other part around that is actually it makes you much more flexible as an organization when it comes to prioritization. You're able to make those trade-offs between the different projects or different areas in a way that is much less about I'm protecting my thing and more about what is the best use of people's great time and talent and skills in solving the problems that keep your accountable executives awake at night.
You're better able to compare the demands and the needs to identify the right things to focus on, I guess, when it's all in one pot going through the kind of a centre of excellence to deliver.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And you're able to make those trade-offs that you probably wouldn't be able to make if those teams were separate. Yeah.
So that so the sort of focus has been bring the group together. Sort of, it's interesting actually that it's not necessarily brave, I'm not sure is the right word, but it's a forward-looking move actually for an organization where there isn't really a problem, as you say. There's not really, you have a good engineering function, you have a good governance function, you have a good data science function, all I assume delivering good value, but that kind of foresight to go, actually, there's a sort of, we can make this even better rather than just sort of status quo. I think it's quite a bold move. Maybe brave is the right, but certainly a bold and pragmatic move to make. Was that the objective at the start, or is that just sort of evolved to become sort of your preferred or the best way that you thought would work for the bank?
I think it has evolved to some extent. I think it's also a function of our general culture, which is rather than starting with an org structure and putting people into the boxes, we start with what are the talent and skills that we've got? How do we look to develop those in a way that might mean you evolve your org structure to meet that? So this goes back to, we didn't have a chief data officer in the UK. One of the areas I was really keen on was actually exactly what we just said, bringing together those different groups. I was able to kind of put forward the case, sell the benefits almost, and then kind of go forward with that. So I think it has been a bit of an evolution, and I think we learn stuff along the way, what works, what doesn't work, but it feels like more things are working than not working.
Oh, that's the balance you're that's the minimum balance you're after, isn't it? And is it fully, when you talk about center of excellence, is it fully centralized, or actually do you have a center of excellence but then kind of pockets of capability or big teams of capability in different sort of business units or product lines or something like that, or does everything sort of data go through the center of excellence?
So it is centralized in terms of, I guess, in terms of reporting lines and just general kind of structure. Now, one risk of a completely centralized team, I think, is this kind of risk of ivory tower almost, which is you kind of build a center of excellence and it's not really pointed at the things that are really going to do the most impact. So we do actually have a bit of structure within there. So there are specific teams in data science, for example, that are more closely aligned to our new customer acquisition.
Right.
So it's not a complete random pot of data professionals that point at wherever they need to be. There are some links there. There is a bit of longevity of connection.
Right, and that's interesting. So the sort of team structure within that sense of excellence, is that sort of hinted at there, sort of a people or skills aligned to their capability, like data science or data engineering, or are they more aligned to a business unit or a product line, as you say, like or a sort of process like customer acquisition?
So they're currently, I guess, top line aligned to the roles and job families, and then within those different areas, you might subdivide a bit more into different parts of the business. Right. Now, interestingly enough, I've got I kind of flip flop a bit there. Actually, is there an even more kind of optimal solution where you go all in on supporting a particular area and start with, well, what do they need, and kind of fill that up with the skills that you've got. So I don't think there's one kind of concrete best model. It's all about evolving.
Sure. Yeah, and it's got to work. It's got to work. You mentioned earlier, actually, culture, and I think org structure is quite a cultural thing. What you're used to, what the organization will accept. I'm not trying to sort of force a way of working that can't be consumed by the people that you interact with. Cool. And can you just talk a little bit about then the sort of how that center of excellence is made up? You've hinted again at some sort of like broad buckets of capability, but yeah, just the kind of sort of how you're structured within the center of excellence.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So I guess firstly we have our data analyst group, and I try to characterize a great data analyst as being someone who can tell you what's happened. So either they are great at digging into reporting and kind of putting in place kind of the dashboarding that we need to understand what's happened yesterday, last week, last month. They're the team that we look to help us resolve issues when things might not have gone as planned.
Right.
But also they're the team that implement a lot of our campaigns. So if we need to make changes to a customer's account, for example, the data analyst team will be the ones who can identify which population it is that we need to go and talk to and kind of pull that campaign together. So data analysts typically really great deep data domain knowledge, good stakeholder management, good kind of communications. That tends to be the key skills in the data analyst group. Okay. Data scientists, if the data analysts are great at telling us what has happened, the data scientists hopefully can be great at telling us what's going to happen next. Okay. And so this is all around kind of predictive modeling. So what we look for there is a kind of a really good blend of consultancy skills, the ability to go into an area, understand what really is the problem, and then to use data and algorithms to find solutions to that. So a really big example for us is around credit risk assessment. So when a potential customer applies to us, we've got a big decision to make. Do we lend to that customer or not? that decision is underpinned by the models, the data, the algorithms that the data scientists work on.
Right.
So that's the data science. Data stewardship, relatively small function, but super important to us. This is the team that makes sure that we can trust the data that we're using. So this is all around, where's the data come from? How do we trust the quality of that? Are we deleting it when we need to delete it? Can people find it in the first place? So that team is really kind of behind the scenes, making sure that everybody else's life is easier. And then we have the data product function, who work with our technology teams to define the platforms and the systems that we use to capture data and to do our analysis. And so within that data product function, it's really important they have a good technology understanding, a really good product mindset, but also some of that technical data skills. So the kind of real mix to make sure that we get the right platforms and systems to make everybody's lives easier.
Cool. So yeah, nice sort of classic kind of split by capability, with everyone clear on sort of the bit of the sort of jigsaw that they're responsible for. You mentioned there about working with technology. So and I was going to ask you about sort of how this function collaborates with the wider organization. But so the first sort of part of that, I think, is going to be so which bit of, where's the line, I suppose, between what's technology and what's your function, and how do you guys collaborate?
Yes, really closely is the quick answer, because I think there's no other way to do that effectively.
Yeah.
So we have a series of technology teams, some great kind of engineers, and they will work with the data product team to define the roadmap. So the data product team almost acts as the bridge between technology and our analyst community, for example.
Right.
And so they will work to define what's our roadmap, how do we prioritize that, and then how do we work with the technology team to deliver against that roadmap. So
they're sort of product managers rather than engineers.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
got it. Great. Okay. And how about how you so there's a bit of a mix of kind of things that pop out in terms of how you engage with the broader business. There's the sort of understanding and developing the roadmaps. There's prioritization, which you mentioned earlier, and that's sort of easier in some ways now. But yeah, so how does that work? What's the sort of the way you interact, the way you understand requirement, the way you lead requirement, maybe, in the operating model that you have in place to engage that wider business stakeholder?
Yeah, and I think there's two different types of work that we work on. One, I guess, is priorities that come into the team. So we have to make sure that we've got really close links to our customer acquisition team, for example, or our customer management team, to really understand what are their goals for this year, for next year, for the year after, and how can the data function help with delivery of that. So a good example is if we're looking to grow and to acquire more customers, a key part of that is continuing to push the development on our data science models. So the more powerful our data science models are, the better the predictions are, the more right decisions we can make, the more we can grow as an organization. So if we know that growth imperative is an important part of the business strategy, then we can prioritize looking at new data sources, for example, or exploring new algorithms. So there's a I would say probably 75-80% of the work that the team does is something that comes into the team in terms of meeting the business strategy. The rest is, I think, a key part of the CDL role, which is defining the future data strategy for the organization. And so that is less about what do we need to deliver to meet this month, next month's business goals, but more about where do we want to go in the next 5-10 years. And that's super important, because if you're just focused on the here and now, it never gets you to some of that transformational side. So I think I see a key part of my role as being making sure that there is a voice for that longer term data strategy, and that we're continuing to prioritize some of that work.
And you have to sort of put those up against each other, because there's this constant kind of battle between now versus future, and where do you invest the time, and history, I suppose, sort of technical debt, and dealing with what you've left behind. So sort of what you left behind, what you need to deal with right in front of you, and then there's the future. Do you find that sort of prioritization decision across those three sort of domains a challenge, and then within the kind of what do we do now, how do you make that prioritization decision?
So some of this, well, a lot of this is about network, making sure that you have a good relationship with the different parts of the organization.
Yeah.
And part of that is making sure that I want to help the various different accountable executives to deliver on their business need. And so what can we do that helps deliver some of those quick wins? And I think what that does then is it builds the right culture, the right goodwill to be able to talk about that longer term strategic view as well.
Yeah.
And there's ways of talking about that longer term strategic view that gets you your buy-in as well. So if you're thinking about some kind of data transformation type work, what's the end goal? What's the purpose of doing that? It has to be around making things easier for analysts or leading to results quicker, all of which are what your accountable executives are after. So I think it's around balancing those short-term wins with selling the benefits of that longer-term vision.
Yeah, because there's a bit of almost a bet in the longer term, isn't there? If you need to acquire some more customers next month, that's sort of quite tangible. It's like, well, we've got to do that. There's a need for it. Someone's asking for it. But some of the future, it's a little bit. It can be leap of faith. It can be, we're not sure if that's the right direction for us. But do you line that future stuff to the future strategy of the organization? Because there's the operations, which is the now, and that normally feeds into a future strategy of the business. And or is there kind of a multi sort of dimensions to this, which is aligning to the future strategy of the organization, but some of it is just innovation in how you do data things and how you do data science and the way you approach things. So do you balance those?
So I think so. It is. So our data strategy is a key component of our future business strategy. So those two things can't be different in my mind. I think if your data strategy isn't folded into where your business needs to go, you're really going to struggle when it comes to buy-in, and when those trade-offs really bite. You need to be able to point to why this is important for the long-term strategy of the business. So if I think about our long-term business strategy, there is a section there around data, around underwriting, around innovation of algorithms, and that provides the assurance for us to prioritize some of those longer term pieces of work.
That's good. It gives you a kind of framework to make your prioritization decision around. There's an expectation that it's going to, that it's part of what you're trying to achieve as an organization. Yeah,
definitely in that data science world, because quite often if you build new models or look at new data sources, the payback isn't this year. The payback will be in kind of 2-3 years time. And so you definitely have to take more of that medium to long-term view.
Yeah, no, great. And just on the kind of subject of those things that you do, you often sort of turn them as use cases. Is there some areas that have been more successful than others, or actually just have you got some good examples of kind of successful use cases that you worked on? You mentioned customer acquisition a couple of times. I don't know if that's an area where you've sort of worked a lot in, but a couple of examples could be quite nice to see. Or how does this, yes, set up a center of excellence, but that's about capability, but the ultimate aim is deliver value. So some of the things that you've worked on would be great to hear some of that.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of examples. So you mentioned customer acquisition. That is a big part of our focus, and it is that key decision point that we need to make sure we get right. What we've done there actually over the last few years is a bit of an exploration around techniques and approaches, and from a data science perspective, especially around credit risk assessment. If you go back almost 20 years, logistic regression has been your key kind of tool of choice there ever since the kind of birth of credit scoring. One of the opportunities that we've looked at over the last few years is how do you bring in some of the more complex machine learning algorithms to help improve your decision making.
Right.
Now you need to balance that with the kind of explainability angle. So you can't move to an entirely black box methodology here.
Yeah.
We are a heavily regulated industry. We need to be able to explain our models to some extent to regulators, and to customers. But actually, that's been a really interesting area, is how do we kind of push some of that innovation exploration into machine learning that helps us make better decisions, and we've seen a lot of success in moving there.
Right.
The other example which I quite like is less around a model deployment, but it's more something that, how do you use data and data science to influence your business decisions as to what you work on. So we have a mobile app that's a big part of how we interact with our customers and how customers service their accounts. There's always a huge long list of potential features that you could build into that app. So how do you know which are the ones that are going to have the biggest impact on customers? This was a problem that our mobile app team came to us probably about 5 years ago. What we were able to do is look at some of the call log information from when customers actually call into us, and do some natural language processing there to see, are there any common themes for why customers might be calling in that might point to features that are not available in the app at the moment that we could build and make it easy for customers to self-serve.
Right.
And one of the themes when we did that analysis was a lot of focus on payments. So a customer finding it difficult to pay in the app and calling in to make a payment. That really helped prioritize the some of those features in the app around making it easy to make a payment. Right. So that's like a really good example of using data and using data science to actually go, here's where you should focus. Here's the thing that's going to have the big customer impact.
Yeah, nice. And it's helping answer the question of what's the priority for a digital part of the organization. And then, that I guess drove some digital development to make it easier to make payments in the app. And then do you continually then use data to sort of to assess how that's working, where people drop out, where challenges are made, and do you iterate, or is it kind of that was like a nice one-off project and it sort of leave it, and if it becomes a problem, it will come back up, and new demand will come into the pot of the backlog, if you like? Or do you keep an eye, do you track, do you assess and then react?
A bit of a mixture, I think, depending on right. Which part of the organization. So if I go back to the acquisition side, once you build and deploy that model, that's not the end. It's all around how do you make sure that model continues to be working. You're always looking for just making sure my data is still correct, nothing breaks, but also how do I continue to make that model better, whether it's more up-to-date data, whether it's new data sources, whether it's new techniques.
Got it. Great. Well, in terms of sort of where you go from here, what's the kind of next? I don't know if you plan this far ahead, and I know we've talked about sort of conceptually aligning to the future, but what's some of the things you're focused on? What does the next year or two look like in terms of where you want to take the Centre of Excellence?
A couple of things that are definitely top of mind for me. One is around making it easier to get to data insights for non-data professionals. Yeah. So I think one of the benefits of the Centre of Excellence is we've got a really great, deep technical knowledge of data, but I don't want that to be the only source of insight and data. And actually, if we can get to a point where more of our wider business analysts can self-serve some of that really quick insight, then actually it means we get to results quicker, but also it takes some of the pressure off that Centre of Excellence to focus on some of the more technical stuff. So that's a big thing for me.
It's similar to your digital example. You've got customers who are having a problem on something. They're calling the centre, then you're giving them some capability so they can self-serve. It's the same thing, but with access to data. So you can use some similar principles there.
No, definitely, definitely. And whether that is a kind of helping bridge some of that skills gap, or whether that's kind of the provision of dashboarding or tools or resources that help people get to it. So that's a big thing for me.
Okay.
Second area, I think, is all around more of that explainability angle. So I think there is an increasing demand from consumers to understand where machine learning and AI is being used in their day-to-day interactions,
and how it's making a decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how it's leading to everything, basically, right? And so I think as a data science community, we have a responsibility to lean into that and to work with the regulators on how do we think about interpretability and explainability of our algorithms. One of the areas that I've enjoyed the most, actually, over the last kind of 2 years is working with the Bank of England and the FCA as part of their exploration into AI. And part of that is how do you manage and govern AI, but also the explainability angle as well. It's just a great opportunity to work as an industry on providing more consumer understanding.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that sort of broader societal benefit and how those decisions are made and why those are made, that helps the average consumer like me be able to understand how banks making these decisions, how does that impact my credit rating, what products might I be accepted for, and what's right for me and what's not right for me. So that's great to hear that there's a focus and energy around that. Great. Well, I think it's great to kind of dig into your journey, illustrious career at Capital One. It's like a statistics background into CDO is very relatively rare. So is such a long career at a single place. I think it's clearly an empowering place to work and a place that supports development and career progression and all those good things. So it's been really great to hear your story and how you've made such a success of what you're doing at Capital One. So thanks so much for coming on the show to talk that through.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, great. And thanks everyone for listening to that. I hope you enjoyed hearing Dan and his story, and there'll be plenty more of that to come in the coming episodes. So we'll catch you again soon.